Hello and welcome. It is Saturday night, November 28th, and we are live with game three of the Villanova season. We were not expecting to be on tonight. We were expecting to have a nice little break until Monday, where we were supposed to play St. Joe's. But surprise, the Cats are bringing you back in on a Saturday night for a third game from Bubbleville. Really exciting to see this, I think, for all of us that miss college basketball so much, especially with a canceled March Madness that we're coming off of, to get a surprise game on the schedule. Fantastic. I think, of course, we probably traded one here because it's very unlikely that we're going to get a game against Temple. That game is canceled. It was supposed to be next weekend. Hopeful that we might get that game back on the schedule later in the season. But basically, the Cats said, hey, we have an opening on our schedule, and got to give your hats off to the folks in Bubbleville and involved with both programs, Villanova and Virginia Tech, for making this one happen. Really happy and excited to see that this is a great way we have to spend our Saturday night. So we're playing around with different times here with Villanova Tip Time, the unofficial Villanova men's basketball pregame show. Playing around with different times. Wanted to go live exactly 20 minutes before tip-off tonight. You're going to find tonight's game on ESPNU, so I would get that on so that you obviously don't miss tip-off hanging on to my every word. But playing around with different lengths, and so tonight we wanted to give a good 20-minute show a go. I think topics we want to run through. I want to recap what we saw a little bit on Thursday as Nova took home some more hardware for the Davis Center in winning the 2K Empire Classic at Mohegan Sun. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the storylines going on around college basketball. We have a mailbag question from our loyal follower Joe from Boston. And then we want to get into this game. Who's Virginia Tech? We talked a little bit about what's going on in the ACC in our first game, because we saw our first ACC opponent in Boston College on Wednesday. We're getting our second with the likes of a Virginia Tech. And we'll get into a little bit about who they are, what we can expect from this game, what are we hearing coming out of Vegas. And that should fade you right into tip time at the top of the hour. So let's jump into what we've started to see evolving from this Cats team. What's the story with this Cats team? And obviously, I think working a little bit of a recap of Thursday. I think I had convinced myself, honestly, in all the research leading up to Thursday night's game and our pregame show, I had convinced myself that Arizona State was a really good team. Obviously runs a quick guard-heavy style offense. I think one of the main storylines coming out of that was Villanova's really strong ability to control the pace of the game, which ultimately I think led to them controlling that game really wire to wire. And even though the final score was only 9 points, I think at one point the Cats had got up about 15 or so, and really started to pull away. So I don't know that 9-point differential was really all that significant. They did get, with some of those garbage points, they did actually squeak out the over, which with a couple minutes left, looked like it had absolutely no business hitting. And then Villanova covered the spread, which I believe was 6, which is good because that then will put them at 1 out of 2 for covers. And remember, friends, good teams win, great teams cover. So, I think what I found to be a really strong performance. When I turned to my better half as we were watching the game, and I said to her, I was like, because she gets to see the inside the belly of the beast, right? And during the Boston College game was like sort of all over the place, like clearly very sort of upset, nervous that this game was as tight as it was. The Arizona State game, I just kept saying over and over again, I think this Arizona State team is also really good. So got to really like what we were seeing from Villanova. I think really impressed with the defensive adjustments the team was able to make through the first 10 minutes of the game. I think the first 10 minutes started off a little shaky again. You're starting to think oh no, maybe a repeat of the night prior. But I think they did a good job of stopping the hot hand in Josh Christopher, who's the 5-star freshman at Arizona State, who came out really hot to start the game. And even though he continued to, score buckets throughout the game, I think they mitigated the hot hand, so to speak. And then they completely locked down, Remy Martin, one of the best players in the country. So I think overall, a strong A coming back from a weaker defensive effort in the first game against BC. So a stronger defensive effort against Arizona State. The storyline that I did not want to start off with because it would almost be cheap is that Jeremiah Robinson Earl is so good. As I was sort of taking some casual notes throughout the game, I just kept hitting this, and I was like, man, I'm gonna beat this storyline like a drum. Like the absolute proverbial broken record that is. He is so good. He was just unbelievable on Thanksgiving night. If you looked at his shot chart, it was, the kind of thing that would make you want to cry, because he was just popping from all over the court. And then in the second half, I think started to get a little bit more aggressive with threes, knowing he was feeling it. And it's just like, if this guy's hitting the three, we were already sort of afraid that we were going to lose him to the NBA before. If he's going to be hitting these shots from all over the court, being the type of presence that he is, you heard Jay Billis talk a lot on the broadcast on Thursday night about his ability, Jeremiah Robinson Earl's ability to guard 1 through 5, anybody on the court. And we'll see that tested tonight, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And if he's hitting the three, I mean, you're seeing a lotto player in the making. Twitter, we're only 2 games in. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. But this Twitter sphere was buzzing. I believe John Rothstein, who's a great follow for those of you that don't already follow him. John Rothstein said this might be Coach Wright's best player ever, which is sort of a crazy thing to think about. And again, just leaves us so excited with, what we're going to see from him this year. But I mean, all night on Thursday, it was like, oh my God, how good is this guy? How good is this guy? And then he kept doing something to make you say it again, even though you knew you were saying it a lot. So great stuff there. So Caleb Daniels, we've obviously been hot on the Caleb Daniels train, from episode 1, really liked his ability, or really saw him as somebody that could come in and just sort of be this scorer that could really add something to Villanova. And I think, insofar as Villanova being a team that returned at really everybody except for Sadiq Bey, Caleb Daniels is an amazing, you can't expect any better than that as far as replacing somebody that you lost to a top 20 draft pick to the NBA draft. I think the power trio of guards, as I started to sort of refer to them in my notes and around my house, between Justin Moore, Caleb Daniels, and of course Colin Gillespie, our senior leader. Just a real power trio that I think are going to continue to have these really strong, almost quietly strong performances as Jeremiah Robinson Earl continues to get a lot of the emphasis and starts to draw more emphasis from the defenses in the teams that they're playing. You're going to see a lot of opportunities for the other guys. An interesting text from a good buddy of mine who I often text back and forth during Villanova games. The text that really rang true with me at some point, I want to say it was late in the first half or early in the second half. The quote was Gillespie, or Colin, as we were referring to him in the text message. Colin is like a coach on the floor, and it's spot on. Again, another. I feel weird calling it a quiet performance when somebody scores 13 points, which is definitely a respectable effort on the stat sheet. But it was just the absolute floor general out there, and I think had the Cats moving the ball really nicely and finding the best shot. And again, just really, really pleased with what we saw in from an overall effort standpoint against what I think was a really, really good team in Arizona State. And Justin Moore must have heard us, retweet, reclick that story on him being sort of compared to a Josh Hart type, because he had another really, really, really strong game, scoring in the high teens in points. His plus-minus differential for when he was on the floor versus when he wasn't was, I believe, the highest on the team. So this is a guy. How excited can we continue to be getting about this Cats lineup that seems to have a really high ceiling? As with every great Coach Wright team, what happens when the shots aren't falling? We've already seen, the Coach Wright's sort of complicated switch off defense can sometimes be, give the team fits in actually showing up on defense. But as far as ceiling goes, it seems like this team is the real deal and is a team that we can all be really excited about. And in the end, the team took home more hardware coming from Mohegan Sun, winning the 2K Empire Classic of 2020. Not necessarily the field that we envisioned it to be, but still a very legit piece of hardware, having to beat a top 20 team from a power conference. So before we get into this game, looking at the clock, we're about halfway into the pregame show right now. Before we get into this game, breaking it down, I want to at least touch on a couple of storylines around college basketball. Number one, two teams that we were very high on the program on, I believe, Thursday night, episode 2, where UVA and Illinois both came back down to earth. So UVA actually lost to University of San Francisco, which I don't think many people saw coming, and sort of that early season upset that has you scratching your head. I for one was like, oh man, this might be an even deeper UVA team than the one that won the national championship the other day. And then of course they promptly lose to a mid-major out of nowhere. So a fun storyline involved there. And then Illinois, same thing. They've just absolutely blew the doors off of both of their first two opponents. And then they barely squeaked by Ohio. Barely squeaked by Ohio. Now, we don't want to be holding people too hard against them for a gritty, hard-fought-out win. Stop me if you've heard that before, maybe along the lines of what we saw from Villanova on Wednesday night against BC. But still, interesting to follow. And then finally, UCLA, which, we were high on when we did our little Pac-12 preview for the Arizona State game. We talked about UCLA being sort of in the top of that conference, and they have not looked good. They've looked really shaky, notably shaky out of the gate, picking up a bad loss and then needing 3 overtimes to be Pepperdine yesterday. So interesting storyline to watch out west there. Okay, mailbag. Joe from Boston. We're going to get into that before we get into this game. So is Anton doomed for a repeat of last season, which will he already be too far behind by the time he starts practicing? I think it's tough to say. Is he doomed for a repeat of last season? Of course, we hope not, right? And I don't know that I want to go on record and say that. However, I do think he's almost going to be helped by the fact that teams in general are getting much more limited practice time. So he's, I would say, falling less behind than he would if we were living in a non-pandemic world. So something to keep in mind there. Of course, we hope for the best. We want to see him back. At this point, you have to imagine that Coach Wright is settling into a rotation of these core 8 guys. I think hopefully we continue to see this really strong play out of Caleb Daniels, and then you figure your starting lineup is pretty set between Gillespie, Moore, Caleb Daniels, Jermaine Samuels, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. You're going to see that as a set starting 5, obviously barring injury or any major curveballs coming along. And then you're going to continue to see this rotation of Swider, Slater, and Dixon off the bench. I think you're going to be seeing Dixon get more minutes. If you're playing a team that has a pretty strong big man, you might get to see him a little bit more tonight, as Virginia Tech generally is a guard-heavy team, but they do have a strong big man in Kevy Aluma. We'll get into that more in a moment. But yeah, rounding out the Brian Anton question as I sort of drifted into tonight's game, I think that we're obviously looking for him to get better soon, but I think anything we get from him at this point, you almost have to feel as gravy, and we're going to ride with the guys that are there and that are healthy. So let's talk about who this Virginia Tech team is and what to expect from them. They've returned 4 out of 5 starters. They, I saw a quote from our friends over at VU Hoops in their game preview that, I think it was VU Hoops, but every, mid-tier team in a power conference's worst nightmare is their, star player from last year transferred. But they were able to pick up another good transfer coming in Justin Mutz, who came heavy scoring type coming in from Delaware for them. Also Kevy Aluma, who's their big man, who showed up big in their first game. You're going to see a quick offensive style, not dissimilar to what we've seen from Villanova's first 2 games. I think the key difference here is you're going to see a better ball movement from this Virginia Tech team. You're going to see probably better perimeter shooting. And I think that's going to be the X factor for whether or not the Hokies can really give the Cats a game tonight. Are they able to push that upper 30s, God forbid low 40s from 3 percentage? That's, I think, their best chance to give the Cats fits. Can they swing it around? Can they find enough good perimeter shots? And then similar, again, because of this quicker style guard heavy offense, they're going to look to attack and see if they can attack the Cats inside, who have looked a little weak, obviously, through their first game. Were able to tighten up against Arizona State, but they're going to look to see if they can get away with some dribble drive, as that is going to be a natural strength of their general style. If you look at the Hokies, they're running about 8 or 9 deep overall, so a really strong rotation. And I think that you are in for possibly a fun battle between Kevy Aluma and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. Now, the secret is out on JRE. So if you happen to see a lot of whistles early in this game, don't be surprised if you see Eric Dixon working in there. I think he's the biggest body type to potentially match up against a Kevy Aluma if Jeremiah Robinson Earl can't for whatever reason, or if they need to rotate in. Generally speaking, though, as a team, the Cats have a really good size advantage overall on Virginia Tech, who's very guard heavy and is averaging, I think a full inch or two shorter per the guys that are going to be on the floor. So hopefully size isn't as much of a problem tonight as you fear it might be in other matchups. I think Villanova's squarely in like that mid-sized team, so I think they're good for games like tonight. And then we want to kick off here with a couple of minutes left is the Jermaine Samuels is due train. And I'm probably just going to keep saying it until we get a good game out of him, because he's been relatively quiet. I thought his performance against Arizona State was better than BC, where I think he was off to a little shakier start in the first game. But now that you have teams keying in on, obviously, Jeremiah Robinson Earl and what I've referred to as the power trio of guards, that's going to leave a lot of opportunities for Jermaine Samuels. Actually worth noting, when I was going over to the Virginia Tech, one of their basketball fan blogs, looking at their game preview, they didn't even spell his name right. Their teams, I think, aren't going to be keying in on him as much, and he's a bona fide veteran starter for this team with great talent. And I think if you underestimate him, he can put up a big game, and I would love to see that from him tonight, as you expect these teams to really crash down on Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Justin Moore, and Colin Gillespie and try and limit their shots. That's going to leave a lot of opportunity open for Caleb Daniels with that takeover style, and Jermaine Samuels to be the guy that shows up that the other team might not have been expecting. Oh boy. So we have about 3 minutes left here, and we want to talk about what we're seeing in Vegas. Current line is at Nova minus 9.5. I was able to secure that at Nova minus 7.5 yesterday. So I got to be happy with that. The public money is on Nova. The line has moved from 7.5 to 9.5. I think up even as high as 10 right now. So obviously, I'm feeling really good about that. Holding a ticket with 7.5. I think researching for the content for the program, was able to sort of talk myself into Virginia Tech being able to make this a game. I think that being a potential bubble team later this season. I like the matchup for the Cats. I really do. That's why as soon as I saw that line at 7.5, I jumped on it. I think tonight is the night that if the Cats can get the shots falling early, might be a good signature non-conference win for them tonight. They're coming in a little bit less rusty. They played two teams with not necessarily tremendously overlapping styles of play, but I think the shaking the rust off and with vaguely similar styles of play, I just got that good vibe got that attitude flowing for tonight for the Villanova Wildcats. And then the over-under is 137.5, I think pushing up to 138. I just love the heck out of that over. I don't know why. You're never really going to hear me say that I love any under, I suppose. But I like that over a whole lot. And we are about a minute from game time here, Cats fans. So we're going to be back for a Wednesday afternoon game against St. Joe's, which was originally supposed to be Monday. Got moved out to Wednesday because of our late add to the programming schedule this evening. Again, hats off to the folks in Bubbleville and the folks from both programs for making it happen, getting us some surprise Cats basketball, which is never a bad thing, so long as they're able to take home the W, knock on wood. And again, we'll be back on Wednesday for St. Joe's. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let us know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, gripes, or you just think this jacket looks great, because you're going to probably be seeing it every night. And you can find tonight's game on ESPNU. Ladies and gentlemen of the Nova Nation, it is tip time. Let's go, Cats.